Okay, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's wonderful to see so many people here in the room, and welcome to everyone who is joining us online here for this event at the Euractiv offices, Zero-Emission Vehicles Accelerating Demand Across Europe. My name is Jack Parrock. I'm a moderator for Euractiv. Delighted to have been asked along to come and lead this discussion today. For everybody who's present, here in the room and also online, you can use the Slido tool to ask questions as we go through. So if you go to slido.com or use the QR code that's on the screen and then put in the hashtag ZEV, then that will take you to the page, and here on my pad I can see them and put the questions to our panelists and our speakers as we go through the event. So this is a Euractiv event supported by ACEA, the European Automobile Manufacturers Association, and we're delighted to get into this conversation with them. So let me introduce you to all of our speakers. I have Eduardo Turano, who is the head of unit for mobility road in DG Klima of the European Commission. It's wonderful that you're here with us. I have Maria Linkova-Nys, who is the Executive Head of Policy and Strategy at ACEA. It's really great to have you in the room here with us. And we have some online participants who are joining us remotely, and I'll address each of them now. We have Stefan van Zyl, who is the International Policy Coordinator for Sustainable Logistics in the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. It's wonderful, Stefan, that you're here. Can you hear and see us?
Thank you. Yes, I can.
We've got you. Welcome. It's great to have you along with us. We have Christoph Wolf, who is the CEO for the Smart Freight Center. Christoph, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
And we have had just a bit of a last-minute change in our participants. We had Christina Boo, who was going to join us, but instead she's unable. So we've got Sveinung Kvalo. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. Because we haven't had an opportunity to go through that, who is a senior advisor for the Norwegian Electric Vehicle Association. Sveinung, how are you doing?
That's correct. I'm stepping in for my boss, Christina Boo, because
Wonderful.
There's a lot of things happening on policies in Norway right now.
Yeah, we're really, really grateful that you've been able to come along and join us. Okay, so contextually, despite good supply progress on the supply side, the EU market for zero-emission vehicles is growing more slowly than anticipated. And that includes cars and vans, as well as medium and heavy-duty trucks, buses, and coaches. Everything's a bit slower than had been hoped. So we're here to ask, how can we best stimulate the ZEV market adoption in the different vehicle segments, and how can policies and Brussels EU policies work to do that? So let's start with you, Eduardo. Perhaps you can give us a bit of a policy sort of landscape outline of where we are right now and what you guys in the Commission are trying to do to stimulate that lagging growth.
Yes, thanks a lot. So before going into that, maybe I would like also to start recalling a bit the context and why for us it's extremely important, the transition towards zero emission mobility. And I would say three main reasons. First one is the climate angle that we absolutely don't have to forget. We have climate change impacts that all over Europe, we all know, are becoming more severe by the day. We have targets in our climate policy to make sure that we can tackle the climate change issue. We have a 55% economy-wide target to reduce emissions by 2030 at least. We have a climate neutrality goal for 2050, and we have the proposal for the 90% GHG reduction for 2040, which currently European Parliament and Council are discussing. And in this context, of course, as we always say from the Commission side, all the sectors of the economy will have to contribute, and transport needs to play its part, and road transport included, because it's a sector where the decarbonization is proving to be challenging. If we look at the trends over the years, road transport are the only sectors of the economy where emissions are increasing compared to the starting point of 1990. And that is where basically we're worried, and it calls for decisive action to revert the trend. Second reason, there is an energy security problem. Of course, transport today is very much reliant on fossil fuel which we import. Every year we spend more than 300 billion euros of fossil fuel that we also import from countries that are not always the most reliable ones. We all know about the geopolitical circumstances that are determining difficult situation when it comes to fossil fuel imports. And of course, this creates an issue also when it comes to the European economy overall. So, of course, the transition to zero-emission mobility is also an opportunity for us to fight the energy security issue. Third, it's about the competitiveness of the sector. What we are seeing on the global stage more and more is that countries and markets are evolving towards zero-emission powertrains and zero-emission mobility. According to the International Energy Agency, 1 out of 2 of the new cars that will be sold globally in the world in 2035 will be electric. The situation is changing basically in all the major markets, not only in the EU, but also in China, but also in emerging markets in Latin America. I was reading recently that African countries are even banning the import of internal combustion engines. So it's important that we prepare our industry to be ready with the powertrain and the technologies that will be on demand on the global stage. And this is why I think the transition to zero-emission mobility is an opportunity that the automotive industry is to take. And to be honest, I think there are a lot of investments that are happening on industry. I'm sure Maria will tell us a little bit more about that. And there is commitment of industry to go in that direction. But it's also, we have to recognize that it's a moment where automotive industry is facing challenging circumstances because there are different transitions that they are facing. It's the digital, it's the clean transition. It's a moment where there are geopolitical tensions, so the trade situation is not always clean and certain. The volumes of cars that European manufacturers are selling on the internal market, but also outside, are lowering. There is a bit of delay still on some of the technologies of the future, being digital, being batteries, where we have to do a bit of catch up. So a challenging situation, but we think that, let's say, we have to make sure that we work in order to solve these challenges and turn this into an opportunity, as I was saying, not only for the climate, but also for our economy. And how we do that is a bit what we try to describe from the Commission side in the Automotive Action Plan, where we work on 5 different areas, including clean mobility. And in that context, we have a lot of action that we will put on the table to make sure that the demand of zero-emission vehicles will increase on the market. So to conclude, and then maybe the discussion will follow, I think when it comes to stimulating demand, it's about making sure that these vehicles becomes more affordable, because we have to move to the mass market, and this is what industry needs, because the volumes are what determines for industry the profit margins that are also needed for investments. We have to make sure that there are all the enabling conditions in place so that the user experience of using these new powertrains is good, being it infrastructure, being it total cost of ownership reduced compared to current situation and to alternative. And therefore, there are EU actions that can be put forward with this respect. There are member state actions that will also have to be put in place. We will hear maybe from the colleagues online and also in the follow-up discussion. But I think, of course, it's a chance and it's an opportunity that we have to try and catch and lead the race of what is going to be demanded on the global markets.
This is it. Maria, from your point of view, why is this uptake lagging? Because the supply is increasing. There are vehicles being made.
Yes, thanks, Jack. And maybe I'll just start first with giving a little bit of a context, because also, as many of you in the room know, of course, the Commission is now working on the revision of the regulation for setting emission standards for cars and vans. And we, as I say, have finalized our proposals for that. And basically what we say is that fully agree with what Eduardo said. We want to decarbonize road transport. We support the 2050 climate neutrality goal. So it's not a discussion about the what, but the discussion about the how from our perspective, because the current method of achieving the objective, which is just to have a 100% BEV market in 2035, we feel that this is not working. And this is not because I saying this, but just if we look at the market figures, the transition is happening just much slower as was expected. So when we look at passenger cars specifically, the market share of purely battery electric is less than 16% at the moment. For vans, it's less than 9%. So how are we to go from 15% or 9% to 100 in less than 9 years? So that's, I think, message number one in our position paper, is that it's not about the target, it's not about the ambition, but it's simply about the pace set by the regulator in the first place was probably over-ambitious, over-optimistic, and the current market realities and geopolitical and economic realities just do not match this pace. The second message is that we also believe that it's not just about setting the targets and then thinking that everything will happen on itself, but there's also quite a lot of work required on enabling conditions. And Eduardo, you also mentioned that member states would need to do a lot of work when it comes to enabling infrastructure. Recharging infrastructure is, of course, the case in point. Still, I think more than 60% of all charging stations are located in only 3 European countries. So here, still quite a lot of work that needs to be done for the transition really to pick up the pace. So that's message number 2, really double down on enabling infrastructure, because just revising the regulation without doing anything on enabling infrastructure will again lead us nowhere, and 5 years from now we'll be sitting here and debating 2030 targets that are not achievable. Then the third message is that the resilience and competitiveness dimension have to be somehow incorporated also into considerations. So we all, of course, know the world we live in now. We believe that focusing only on one technology, battery electric, also the technology where we're fully dependent on China, also creates a dependency and a problem for the resilience of the European economy. So allowing other technologies where Europe is actually quite strong, such as, for example, plug-in hybrids, is not just is also a matter of strategic autonomy and resilience, and that also needs to be taken into consideration during the revision. So that's just a big picture, giving a context specifically on cars and vans. Now, on demand-side measures, the topic of today's discussion. So maybe again, just starting with passenger cars, because we represent also cars, vans, and trucks, and there, depending on the segment, you see different picture and different measures that work for different segments. But when talking specifically about cars, what we see when we look at the market data is what we call the Europe of 3 speeds. So we have 3 clusters of countries in the EU with completely different rates of electrification. So you've got countries like Finland, Norway, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, where the market share of battery electric vehicles is somewhere between 30 and 90%, so rather high. Then you have a cluster in the middle, France, Germany, Portugal, Austria, with the electrification rate between 18 and 23%. And then you have the third cluster, so all other member states, so all Central, Eastern Europe, where the electrification rate is below 10% in general. So what we see clearly is that the uptake of battery electric vehicles correlates with the GDP per capita. And currently, it's, of course, the wealthiest nations with more purchasing power that can afford to high electrification rates. So that's also something to keep in mind when designing policy measures. And this is where demand incentives, so purchase and fiscal incentives, are absolutely essential in our view, especially in those less affluent countries, to ensure that we have the mass market that we all need to reduce emissions from the public transport. So that's the passenger cars. For commercial vehicles, vans and trucks, and I know we're going to talk more about this in detail later, but there, because these vehicles operate in a completely different environment, they are, say, commercial tools, there the total cost of ownership is paramount. So think about prices of electricity. So it simply needs to be cheaper for them to charge a vehicle rather than fuel a tank. Availability, accessibility of infrastructure. Do we have enough megawatt chargers so that an owner of a truck or a user of a truck knows that he won't spend too much time charging it, which he would have spent on the road hauling goods. Toll-free access, for example, all these incentives are really important for that segment to boost demand. So there we also see there is still quite a lot of room for the Commission and Member States to implement or introduce new measures to ensure that we have strong demand also in that segment.
There's so many different angles, and it's all sort of on the same roads, but different things need to come into it. Like you say, we'll get into that a little bit more. Let's bring in Stefan now. Perhaps you can give us a short introduction as to how the EU policies are affecting the work you do in the member states, you specifically in the Netherlands, and how that has fit into your sort of outlook on electrification, but also on zero-emission vehicles more broadly, as we heard from Maria, the sort of span of different options.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks, Eduardo and Maria, for giving that broad overview. I totally agree on what you've been saying on the different speeds of Europe, but also in terms of the urgency to achieve our climate goals. So when we look at European measures, they've really set the bar for what we need to achieve in the future, and they're very normative by nature. So if we talk about the CO2 standards, it's very important. It gives a lot of certainty to its manufacturers and also banks to have that investment, to know where we're going, but also the Renewable Energy Directive, AFIR, etc., which are basically setting the bar for countries, for member states, and for energy suppliers. So what we try to do in the Netherlands is to accompany those measures to create demand. So to give a couple of examples for the heavy-duty commercial sector, we have zero-emission zones since the start of this year. We will be introducing a toll scheme by next year. I think the guidelines given in the Eurovignette directive have been very clear, and they create sufficient stimulus or possibilities for stimulus for trucks or for emission-free vehicles. And what we see is if we take those European measures and we accompany those with national measures to create the demand, we actually can achieve this transition. So that was mainly on the TCO part. So TCO is very important for commercial vehicles, obviously. We haven't touched on the other boundary conditions, which are the charging infrastructure. So I think that's also, if you look at those prime countries like Norway, Netherlands, etc., we have a very high energy infrastructure density if it comes to charging infrastructure. We've planned ahead, and yet we face some difficulties and bottlenecks. But I think it's very important to start working on that at a very early stage. At some point, you will run into what we're having right now is grid congestion. But that's not only related to the mobility sector, but also to all the sectors which are more and more electrifying. Also based on climate goals. So electrification is a very effective measure, and that means you get a run on electricity. So to sum it all up, I think we need to play together between European measures and national measures are needed to give a right direction for this transition. And I think there's also a lot to be gained in a couple of these countries which have yet to do those investments or to stimulate the demand, etc. That's why we're also very much looking forward to the Commission proposal for greening corporate fleets. I think that will give a level playing field in Europe and a bar for all countries to achieve. We're also looking forward and awaiting the revision of the CO2 standards, see what that brings. Maybe just to summarize it right there.
Move on to Christoph. Perhaps we can ask you, for anybody who doesn't know what the Smart Freight Centre is, can you explain the work that you're doing and how your vision of getting more zero-emission vehicles on the road sort of operates? What are you doing?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having us. Yeah. Well, the Smart Freight Centre is a global platform and non-profit NGO. We have been founded 12 years ago out of a project for the European Commission, or with the European Commission, that established emission accounting standards for freights across modes. And this has become the ISO standard, and we work with that with our 250 almost members, mostly multinationals, all the major cargo owners on road freight, sea freight, air freight. And decarbonizing this sector is actually our purpose, our mission. And I'm just calling in from actually Seattle, US, where we have our US member meeting, with 250 folks actually aligned on that mission, even though the circumstances here are a lot different. Now, maybe a reflection on what we heard today. So I can agree on a number of things easily. So first of all, it's the road freight is super important from a climate perspective. Yeah, so freight overall, so it's 10% of global emissions, of which 3/4 is road freight. So road freight is really a key sector for the global climate. Now, basically every measure there into move to low carbon solutions, low carbon drivetrains, basically means that carriers on the road, trucking companies on the road, many of them being small and medium sized, need to make investments, and they only do these investments if the total cost of ownership actually works for them. Yeah, so if there is a TCO parity from diesel to electric, this is happening. This is being achieved in more and more cases. I think we can get to that in a second. So economics rule and economics are key. Economics can be favorably influenced, and there's a whole toolbox of that the European Commission actually has put in play. So the Eurovignette, the road tolling, ETS2, what have you. And if you do the analysis from a trucking company point of view, in more and more countries over the next 2 or 3 years, we do a lot of work, and I get to that even in Central and Eastern Europe, like in Poland. Actually, for more and more trucking companies, this actually gets close to TCO parity. Yeah, and so first of all, economics rule, we fully agree. TCO rules. The second is important. It's not going to happen actually across the board in a uniform way. Yeah. It will happen on use cases that are, and if you even look today, there are certain use cases in industrial clusters, in ports, yeah, around mines, around chemical plants, around automotive plants. Those are actually close to TCO parity today. Many other use cases, are not. Yeah, so you have to be very nimble and you have to be very, very clear. So what we do as Smart Freight Centre, we bring in a motivated cargo owners with their carriers. We bring them together on these use cases. So we aggregate demand so that there's critical mass. then we actually create the TCO base, the economical base, so that small carriers or carriers can actually, on behalf of the shippers, move into those things. We think today 20 to 30% of the market is there or already close to that. Yeah. So and the European Commission with the AFIR and many now with the 10 corridors and more support is actually doing a great job to move that forward. We can talk about how it can be accelerated. Yeah. But I think we and the third message I wanted to say, it's not only not happening everywhere at the same speed. So you have to be nimble and you have to be data driven and be focused. It's also not happening in a linear fashion. So we just did what we've done with our friends from the Dutch government over the last year. Together with Bloomberg New Energy Finance, issued the global fact book for investors on zero emission trucking. So you see it's happening in S curves. Yeah. So if you look at China, I think this is at a point when the TCO parity gets close, it's taking off. Yeah. So and the key thing is over the next 2 or 3 years, with all the great instruments, with the prices coming down of the trucks, with the energy basically costs coming down, and availability of infrastructure, that to hit this tipping point, so that we can actually move upwards. So I would not be actually. I understand it needs to be watched, but I would actually still remain a cautious optimism. Yeah, that we can jointly actually move towards the targets that we try to achieve.
It's like you say, those tipping points are different for different versions of vehicles. I remember I was at an event on this when somebody said a company buys a truck with their head and a passenger car is bought with somebody's heart. Like they want the car and it has to work for them as well. But the truck actually has to it's a numbers game for those companies. Exactly. Let's move to Sveinung. It's really great that you're here with us. Thank you so much for jumping in at the last moment. Norway, we've already heard it mentioned, is sort of held up as this success story, essentially. Why? What happened in Norway that allowed you to move more quickly or perhaps more nimbly than other countries in Europe?
Yeah, thanks. We are very proud to be in this high-speed category, of course. We reached 98% in September, and it's 95% so far this year. So it shows that it's actually possible to have only zero-emission electric vehicles in your new sales. Of course, we have very strong policies, and also just want to make it clear that Norway is also part of the EU's CO2 standards and AFIR and Renew. So it's a combination of the EU-wide policies on the demand side, together with strong supply side policies. And of course, a crucial thing was that the Parliament set a 100% target already in 2017. We only had 20% sales then, but still this was looked at as an ambitious target. But now, only like 8 years after, we're already on 100%. So our policies are strong policies that are supporting the EU-wide regulation, is that we have a two-part policy. One is actually a revenue part, which gives revenues to the government, which is to tax fossil cars. And I think this is really important. You can put taxes on what you don't want, which is fossil cars. And the other part is a subsidy part, which is costly for the government, which is a VAT exemption here in Norway. I think what is happening now, and the reason why Christina cannot be here, is that the government has proposed to remove the VAT exemption only in 2 years. We are ready to gradually introduce a VAT, but we think it's a little bit too fast to do it only in 2 years. But we are ready for starting to gradually remove the subsidy part, because we know that the cars have become much cheaper and they are competing quite well against fossil cars. Also, I mentioned that we have a small infrastructure support to initiate a fully functioning charging market. But if you look at what we have done in Norway, we've established a fully functioning commercial market for charging companies, and it has worked really well. And the amount we spent on infrastructure was quite small in the beginning, only to get it started.
I was actually in Kristiansand in Norway just a few weeks ago, and it's really noticeable, the uptake there and the access. It's really interesting. Let's come to you, Eduardo. Perhaps we talked there about incentives or even decentives with tax. This can get complicated for the Commission. I wonder what you make of that sort of discussion and where the right pressure points. Is there places that can be worked in a way, in a broad EU way, rather than what we see in an individual country, that can work to sort of even the balance out that Maria was talking about, the spread across different countries?
No, I think that's a good point, and by the way, all good points made by the other speakers. I think there are indeed actions that can be taken at EU level and has been taken at EU level. There are actions that needs to be more local at member states and even regional level, if you want. At EU level, I haven't mentioned in my introduction, but of course, I think CO2 standards are a central piece of the puzzle. It's true. It's a measure that targets and regulates the supply. But of course, one of the aims of the regulation is to make sure that we create the economies of scale for the production of the powertrain of the future, and economies of scale, of course, bring down the price. There is an issue related to the affordability. There was an issue until 2024. It was pretty clear. I would even say that it's not very much a lack of demand. It was not a lack of demand. It was really a lack of supply. Because, of course, the zero-emission vehicles models were concentrated in the very upper segment, which, of course, comes with a price tag that not everyone can afford. And what is happening now is that, this is shifting towards also the medium and smaller segments. This is happening as of 2025. Why is that? Because the 2025 targets for CO2 emissions started to kick in. That's clear. It's a trend that we have seen already in 2020 when the standards started to apply, and there was a first jump in the electric vehicle penetration. So I think it's important to keep the direction of travel, because if we all believe that the future is electric, we have to make sure that these economies of scale for lowering the price are created. Second point on the CO2 standards, and someone mentioned this before, providing the long-term certainty for the investments in the full value chain of this new powertrain. This is important because the new value chain actors needs the certainty to make sure that they can invest so that the enabling conditions are there, so that demand arrives. So basically the CO2 standards, in a way, acting on the supplies, create the certainty for the infrastructure, for the battery value chain, so that these cars will become more affordable, more usable, and available for all. In a way, it's also a matter of making sure that this transition is just for the consumer, that until 2024, unluckily, they were not able to afford these cars. In 2025, we are at 16%. It's quite a jump. If you remember 2019, it was basically almost nothing. So it's quite an achievement. And it's true, it's not going to continue linearly. So I think it's not that we can extrapolate. At some point, new technologies penetrate the market within our schools, also thanks to this effect of the economies of scale. Related to this, there is also, again, a fuel value chain that needs to develop. When we talk to, for example, to the battery value chain or to the CPO, the charging point operator, of course, they think that if there is not certainty about the powertrain that will become available, there is no business case for them. And there needs to be a business case for a new value chain to start. So on the enabling condition, I would say on infrastructure, the situation is not so bad as Maria depicted, to be honest. We have, and someone also mentioned, we have an alternative fuel infrastructure regulation that is in place. There are targets for the member states. We have reached 1 million charging points in 2025. That was the objective in the mobility strategy that we published last time. If we look at the details, it's true that the situation is very different in the different member states, but that's because the penetration of zero-emission vehicles is very different in the different member states. Good news is that in all member states, the target of AFIR has been met. Good news is that if the share of zero-emission vehicles would double in all member states, there will still be enough infrastructure to power these vehicles. So now the next phase of the AFIR regulation will have to make sure that there is transparency over the price, user-friendliness of the infrastructure. So it's like the next step that we need to do. But I would agree that I would maintain an optimism that this really can happen on the ground. When it's about electricity prices, for example, when we talk to the CPO, they also say that at the moment, the real reason why in public charging points there is an issue of prices is because the utility rate is too low. So, of course, this makes the cost higher for the ones who use the charging point, but with the development and the further deployment of the electric vehicles, of course, the utilization rates will increase, and therefore there will be also an impact on the price. I stop here.
Yeah,
I didn't say about the member state, but I can.
We'll come back to that. Let's head to Maria, because I mean, the positive message isn't necessarily translating so much. And in your recommendation, to one of the key things that I read from it was like no more regulatory burden, like that needs to just be allowed out. But how do you shift the landscape, the climate, without adding regulatory burden? And what are the options for that? Shippers, leasing companies, all of these different options need to be brought in and considered, right?
When we talk about shippers, we're again talking about commercial vehicles, commercial transports, and I'm actually happy that we talk about commercial vehicles so much here, because usually it's all about cars. For specifically for commercial vehicles, as I said, the total cost of ownership needs to, need to matter. And there, we believe that progressive mandates for shippers, for the buyers of those transport services would be a good idea, because again, that could bring demand forward, the demand that we urgently need also for heavy-duty vehicle transport. And I appreciate the optimism of some other speakers on the development of that market, but I just come from a meeting with my members representing that segment, and let's say they're less optimistic that in a couple of years they will, the sales will surge if we don't do anything urgently now.
How is that? Is that it? Like really urgent? They're feeling highly stressed about it, or?
Yeah, because the enabling conditions for the heavy-duty vehicles especially is still a problem. I mean, we don't even have transparency about this, so there's no information. There is indeed a website which shows the charging infrastructure availability for passenger cars, but there's no transparency for heavy-duty vehicles. So we don't even know how many megawatt chargers there are, where they're located. I know there are plans to make this information public soon, but at this stage, we don't even know that. And I mean, that already tells you something about the state of how, the pace that at which things need to pick up is very fast. And are we going to have enough customer demand to meet the targets? I mean, this is really the question, because that is valid for absolutely all segments. We can only move as fast as our customers can move. So if consumers do not think that this is an attractive choice for them, and they can think about it for various reasons, be it the infrastructure, the purchasing price, accessibility of that infrastructure, because maybe they live in an apartment block and they cannot install a charger in the basement of the apartment block. So all these things matter, and unless we solve all of them, then we won't see this mass market uptake, even if we keep the 100% zero-emission target, if we don't, for passenger cars and vans, if we don't make this economically attractive, then this transition is not going to work. It's not just about supply. Indeed, supply has improved. You're correct, Eduardo. But still, we need to see the demand picking up, and perhaps you're right, and we'll see I don't know, a surge to 50% in just a couple of years. But yeah, how realistic is that?
Yeah, it's one of these questions that we were talking about, those S-shaped curves, but when you're not there yet, perhaps you also don't see it. And one of the issues is that with the enabling conditions, each one has to be met in order for the purchase to happen, right? Can we come to you, Christoph, please, about this? Picking up a little bit on what Maria was saying there. How do you work to get different actors involved? This idea of sort of leasing companies, fleet operators, how do you create the appropriate or the best way for them to work together so that the uptake moves more quickly?
Yeah. So I think great question. So our basically the core of our work is to look at. I talked about use cases before. So a corridor is a use case for us, or an industrial cluster like Ruhr area, Benelux, etc. A port environment. These are all use cases, and some of these use cases are today close to total cost TCO parity. And what we do is we work, and we could give you a very concrete example. So we work with actually a CPO in Poland. Yeah, so Poland is, so we're not, not in Holland or not in Sweden or Denmark. So we basically looked at Poland. So Poland has, like, on a member state level, so they have a incentive program for both infrastructure and vehicles. So that is actually happening as we speak, as many other countries actually do. So we looked at our membership base, all the large basic companies, the DHL, Amazon, etc. So IKEA's, Nestle's, and so on, who we know have production facilities and major markets in and around Poland. So we basically said, okay, so what are you moving? So what kind of cargo are you moving on this A4, A2 and A4? These are the two major highways. And then we mapped together actually all these cargo flows. Yeah? And then we basically looked at, if we want to electrify all of that, and now we only talked like 12 to 15 shippers, and their flows. So where would the infrastructure need to sit exactly? So what's the grid connection? Yeah, so you need to do a microgrid. Do you have a substation there, etc.? What is now the TCO based on that for all these shippers one by one? And can they actually go to their carrier and say, based on that, we give you a commitment and you can move because we back you up, and the economics make sense. So we did that. Yeah. So, and basically established and we handed in time actually all the applications for the CPOs as a group, backing that CPO. Six public stations would serve all that demand, and that actually covers, it goes until to Gdansk and to Krakow, etc. So that's an example. So we're doing with Mylands and others, we're doing this in other places as well, and so we are building this in a way, this European grid bottom up. So we look at the economics. So TCO is key. I mean, I completely agree with Maria. We have actually done some very good work with the ASEA team. So actually great collaboration with the ASEA team, and say there's a few things besides actually the monitoring of the enabling conditions, which is actually a key thing, and the implementation of some of the policy levers which can help. For example, the use case of public procurement. So in a lot of cities, so there's actually electrifiable basically vehicles that do construction, that do actually services, that do garbage collection, that do fire brigade, etc. So they're not being electrified. They should be electrified. So if you actually work like with buses, like on an ambitious public procurement program, so that already is like 10% out of the 30%. So that the OEMs need to sell electric in 2030. So if you add the ports, etc., so you're actually getting there, and the corridors. So, but your question was, how do we do this? So we work together. We actually bring these together. We work data driven. We establish the TCO. We establish actually the infrastructure, and then actually jointly we move forward based on mutual commitment. And I think that's a model to scale.
But that also, some of that stuff that you're talking about comes down to budgets as well, and where money's going. Perhaps fire stations and particular buses, it's difficult to move that money around. Stefan, perhaps we can come to you, because this is what what you have to look at. You have to make sure you've got the right money to do the things that you want to do. How do you see those visions? How do you make those decisions?
Yeah. Well, I think to add on what Christoph is saying, we also see a lot of use cases where this is already turning out or coming close to TCO neutral. Obviously, subsidies help, but also a lot of other tools like the ETS2, the tolling scheme, that helps, the 80% discount for tolls on the tariffs, that helps. But just to give you a broad idea, in the Netherlands we have something called, which is very unique in Europe. It's the refund scheme of the tolling scheme. So, which basically comes down to the money that we will generate from introducing toll on the Dutch motorways will be refunded to the logistics sector in terms of subsidies. So that's subsidies for zero-emission vehicles, that's subsidies for infrastructure on private charging locations. And we even go as far as saying, well, if you have difficulties getting a grid connection and you want to use that money for mitigation measures like storage, it can be done. So we really have a broad spectrum of where you can use this money for. And the subsidies are very welcome. So every time we have set this subsidy open, it's been gone within the day or two. And the coming years, this subsidy, this net revenue from the tolling scheme will be growing and become larger. And therefore, also over the coming years, this the available subsidy funds will grow. So I think up to 2030, what we see in prognosis right now is that we expect, well, roughly 50% of the new sales trucks to be zero emission by 2030. What you've seen at the beginning of this year was very interesting. So that's for N2 trucks up to 12 tons. We saw they skyrocketed. So there was extreme surge in the sales of zero emission trucks up to 12 tons. Now, why is that? So first of all, that's due to the zero emission zones which we're installing, but there's a transition phase for that. So it's not only that. Another thing that played a role was taxation. So we have something called the BPM. It's a registration tax. And for vans, that can be, it's applicable to vans. And then, but that's also, so specifically for N1 vehicles, that has been generating a large push to zero emission. So it's really about, well, on the one hand, having funds for zero emission vehicles, subsidies, fiscal stimulus, but it's also about taxation on fossil fuels and, well, vehicles that generate pollutants, which are in most cases internal combustion engines. So what we see now is that this has been very effective. So the taxation scheme in combination with zero emission zones. And just to come back on the public procurement strategies that you've just mentioned, Christoph. So even there, with the implementation of the Clean Vehicle Directive, we have seen we already overcomply. So 60% of the light duty vehicles are already tendered zero emission. 13% are already being tendered zero emission for heavy duty vehicles. For buses, that's up to 64%. So I think that in the Netherlands, that means we can achieve those goals in 2030. But yet that means in Europe, we need a bit of more equalized approach, which generates a level playing field.
Thanks, Stefan. Perhaps for you, Sveinung, you can give us a rundown of some of the issues that we've heard here from some of our other speakers. If you have had any lessons from Norway that you could impart, any sort of learnings. But also, I'm interested to know what your plan is going forward. What's the Norwegian market looking like in the future? What are you guys now trying to do when you've already had this success?
Yeah, I think an important lesson is that, and I think we heard this in the beginning from from Maria that we are a rich country, and that's partly because that's partly how we managed to put in place all these enabling conditions. But I think things have changed now. We are about to remove our subsidies on battery electric cars, and we can do it because we are taxing fossil cars, which creates a revenue for the government. So I think now it's possible to incentivize BEVs without hurting public finance. And you can also have like financing schemes that we heard from the Netherlands here. Actually, in Norway, we are the toll roads income we are collecting actually goes to public transport, biking and cycling, and walking. And also another lesson is that car owners, they really like to drive battery electric cars. They are really enjoy it. And especially when we talk to truck drivers, it's a huge improvement of their working conditions. So when you talk to the drivers, they are really, really happy.
What about it?
Yeah.
Noise, more comfortable, smoother drive, yeah.
No sound, no vibrations. It feels like some kind of luxury, especially for these truckers. When it comes to passenger cars, we have a noise reduction, but not the same vibrations as you have in a diesel truck. And of course, we are also already seeing this impact on our emissions now, because emissions from passenger cars have been reduced with 40% already. So this is actually working. So what we are getting now is that the electric engine is 3 times more energy efficient, it's more comfortable to drive, it's much cheaper to run and maintain, and also comes with health, noise, and climate benefits. So the last thing is the missing piece is the price, of course, but it's closing in, and I think we're going to see a really rapid development in the EU now, and we've seen some really encouraging sales figures the last years, and we heard about the slow group. For instance, Poland and Spain, we have seen a doubling of the sales of battery electric vehicles this year. So I think something now is happening with the TCO, also in countries where you don't have strong incentive schemes like you have in Norway.
Thank you. Let's head on to the member state perspective that you were going to bring in there, Eduardo. We've heard a little bit more from some of our other speakers about what's happening on a national level.
No, yeah, I mean, member states can do a lot indeed. We have heard different good examples, and again, there are things that are, for subsidiarity reasons, better managed at a local level. If you think about the low emission zone that someone was mentioning before, of course, this is not something that we can decide from Brussels, but this is something that can help. And fiscal policy is basically the game changer, I think, here. And this is shown by what has happened in the member state who have shifted the taxation regime. In Belgium, we are now in 2025 at 33% of BEV in the new sales. This happened after a change in the corporate fleet taxation. Denmark has a super favorable treatment when it comes to taxation for new registration, also for circulation. It's astonishing, 65% of BEV. But we have also markets that are less, let's say, Nordic in a way. Portugal, 20%. While in Spain, in spite of the fact that it was really increasing very much this year, we are at 8%. Of course, this is a bit big market, so 8% is a bit low. But Portugal shows that it's doable also, let's say, in other member states. From the Commission side, we are going to work with the member states to identify the possible best practices and recommendations on how to make the transition happen, thanks to financial incentive, fiscal policies, non-fiscal policies. There is an interesting case, for example, in France with the social leasing scheme. It's a scheme that is meant to promotes the uptake of zero-emission cars into a specific part of the population which is not high income. And this is basically also what we are seeing that other member states are thinking to do in the context of the social climate plans, so the plans that are to implement the social climate fund, which aims at vulnerable groups so that, you know, the mass markets can increase. So a lot can be done at member state side, and I mean, on EU level, I'm very happy to hear that the colleagues here have mentioned the Eurovignette, because this is something that is very important, especially for freight. We have just amended the directive in order to make sure that the zero-emission vehicles special treatment is prolonged, so that's good news. We are working on the weight and dimension for the trucks, extremely important. We are also from the manufacturers and the ETS2 and its price signal which will come. We're going to work also on the car label, which is meant to incentivize consumer in a way to make sustainable choice, trying to, you know, introduce more the concept of prosumer into this system. Another interesting thing that is going to be implemented as part of the Renewable Energy Directive is the V2G, vehicle-to-grid capability. This creates, I think, also a very important opportunity for people to take further even financial advantages from the cars that can be used not only as cars but also as a storage system, so that it with a right price dynamic incentive can really create another way to boost, you know, demand for zero-emission vehicles. So I think, of course, you know, it takes a bit of time for all the enabling conditions to be put in place. We have to work on that. But of course, you know, it's again the chicken and egg problem. We have to stay strong on the supply side while developing the demand. And if one doesn't come, the others cannot come. And so that's why the approach of the Commission has always been, you know, to work on the two in parallel.
Yeah. I want to say to all of our audience, both online and here in the room, I'm going to start moving to some of the questions that are coming in. If there's something that you would like to say, or a comment, something that you would like to pick up on, or a question you'd like to put to our speakers, you can either use the QR code, yeah, it's on the screen and sort of on the windows, or go to slido.com, write in the tag ZEV, and I'll start putting the questions to our panelists. Also for our panelists, especially you guys online, the two that are here with me can sort of flag that they would like to come in on this. If you would like to join in on a question, make it visibly known to me, and so I can bring you in. But one of the questions, and this is something I wanted to ask you about actually, Maria, this comes from Min Seo Kim. This is about the business cases for non-BEVs. What are they? Like, a lot of the discussion, even that we've had here today, is about the business cases, the total cost of ownership, and most of the time we are sort of relating to BEVs. What about other options? How do we assess or compare those business cases?
Well, I assume that probably the who asked this question means plug-in hybrids or other technologies. I mean, it's again, it's difficult to give one answer, also because, as we just heard, there are many business cases, especially if we talk about commercial vehicles, and the TCO can vary. I think our main premise is just this technology neutrality approach. It's up to a customer and consumer to decide what's the right technology that works for him. And as long as those technologies can, reduce emissions, they should have a role to play in the mix. Also, between now and the climate neutrality goal.
Yeah. Would you like to come in on this, Eduardo, perhaps?
Well, I mean, and of course I agree that technology neutrality is basically the objective of the next revision, which, I'm not going to elaborate because that's not the moment for us to say anything on that. But of course, yes, we will have to look at all these technologies in the context of the review. And by the way, the public consultation, which closed a couple of days ago, was really asking also stakeholders in general about their views on these plug-in hybrids, for example, or also other technologies. So we're now analyzing the answers, and we're going to look at that in the review.
There's so much like anticipation about these things as well. You mentioned the weights and dimensions directive. Every time I speak to somebody and they're desperate to know exactly what's going on, there's a level of uncertainty. Like, Maria, there's some uncertainty around this, and that can create complications as we wait always for these things to be released. I don't know if you feel that way.
No, because the industry has asked for the earlier revision of the regulation, because in any case it was going to be reviewed, but a few years later. But because of the weak demand on the market and the, let's say, inadequate state of enabling conditions, we thought that it would be a good idea to accelerate this review to already now then look at potentially different options of achieving the target of reducing emissions from the transport. And it's great that the Commission listened to that request. So we really appreciate the work that Eduardo and his team are now doing to assess different options. We know the proposal is imminent, is upcoming, so hopefully we will have that certainty fairly soon. But I think considering the current circumstances, it's more important, to have a little bit of uncertainty for, a year and a half or a year, or less than a year once this new regulation is being discussed, than to have an absolute certainty that we have the targets that are just not achievable, and manufacturers will again face a risk of, paying billions in penalties simply because there is not enough market demand. So there, yes, there's some uncertainty that we have to face because if the legislation is being revised, but we believe this is worth it.
But to be honest, there's no proof that the targets are unachievable. Yeah. Of course, we will only know when the times come. So, of course, if we preempt the discussion by saying the targets are unachievable, of course, to be honest, we don't have the enabling condition for the 2035 target to be met today. Yes, of course, we are in 2025. So there are 10 years to go, 10 years to develop, and the schools that we have talked about before will make it. So, the claim that the targets are impossible is debatable. There are analysts out there who have already published studies to say that actually that's not the case. But again, we will see in the review. Now we are accelerating and we are going to do it soon. So we'll see what happens.
Hotly anticipated. Would any of our speakers online like to come in on this? Is there anything that's... Yeah, please, it's fine.
I think it's really important that we stay firm with the current CO2 regulation. And when it comes to technology, I think we have to be open to all kinds of technologies, but we really have to look at the technologies that are bringing us to full decarbonization, because that's what we are aiming at. And I think it's really important to have this target and work towards the target. And I think 2035 is a good point in time to only sell zero-emission vehicles in EU. And of course, a lot of things have happened the last 10 years in Norway as well, of course, and we are at 100% now. But 10 years back, we were only at around 5%. So it is actually achievable. And we can probably do this now at the same time as we're gradually reducing the subsidies to battery electric vehicles, because the technology now is so good and coming so close to commercially viable. But of course, we need the mass market to work, and we need the smaller cars segments. But a lot has happened already in 2025 when it comes to the smaller segments.
Yeah, thank you. Let's take another question. This one comes from Andrea Tricky. The question is, does zero-emission vehicle also comprise questions about the used materials, e.g. low-emission steel, and where the sort of production of the car? We hear a lot about that. I don't know if anyone online wants to come in on that, or Eduardo?
I can say in the current framework, the definition of zero-emission vehicles is pretty clear. But I can say that I was talking about the public consultation, and we haven't fully analyzed all, but I was too curious to resist, so I went to see a little bit, and some stakeholders indeed are posing this question. If, for example, clean steel or other clean materials should be considered part of the equations for the manufacturers. So I think that's also something that we are hearing nowadays. And again, I'm not going to be able to say what is going to happen, but some stakeholders is pointing to that.
Would you like to come in on this, Maria?
Yes, just to confirm, indeed. So the goal is to reduce emissions, and it doesn't, does it really matter how they are reduced through the tailpipe method or through the supply chain? So indeed, in our paper and our suggestions also between now and after in 2035 and post 2035, we indeed pose this question as to, okay, we really need also to consider the supply chain levers, so the use of green steel, recycled materials, as potentially to use this against compliance with the CO2 regulation. So that's indeed also one of the. That's why this discussion about the method is so important. Again, everyone agrees on the trajectory on reduction of CO2 emissions, but this can be done through various methods, not necessarily just focusing only on 100% BEV.
Yeah.
We hear quite a lot that we focus on tailpipe, but in reality the approach that we have in the current framework is to regulate each entity for what is responsible for. So we regulate the supply side, the vehicle side via action that can be delivered by the supply side. We regulate the decarbonization of the fuel acting on the fuel producer. We have the Renewable Energy Directive with its targets. We have the ETS2 that will come into place. We regulate the clean products like steel via the ETS. Of course, let's not think that the decarbonization of the economy will have to happen by making sure that the CO2 standards are the driver for that. No, it's not one policy that will bring us to climate neutrality. That's why we have, a number of instruments to make sure that we get there. And we say that I don't want to prejudge any future decision on the CO2 standards, just saying that it's not that, we are just looking at the tailpiping and ignore the rest. There are a lot of regulatory means to make sure that the decarbonization actually happens on a well-to-wheel and even a cradle-to-grave approach.
This is also about consumer information as well. Like, I actually have a friend a couple of months ago who was like, is it better for me to buy an old banger and use it until the end of its life, or a brand new electric vehicle? And I was like, there are so many factors that go into that. I don't know. Like, it depends on what the banger. It depends on many. We actually did a load of research. Actually, we sat for an evening and looked through it. But this is it. It's that in a consumer's mind, there's a question around it, and this is one of the enabling questions, I suppose. Is there anyone, one of the gentlemen online, that would like to come in on what we've discussed about, or I've got some more questions we can bring in. Christoph. We'll go to Christoph first and then Stefan. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. 2 points. So first of all, on the stretch nature of the targets, I think. Obviously, this is a whole idea about the 2030 and so targets. So it needs a combined, concerted effort to get there. Yeah. So. And logistics, we talk about commercial vehicles, it's a team sport. Yeah. So this is about collaboration. So basically everybody, the supply side, the demand side, the infrastructure side, actually the bankers, because I think many of these vehicles fleets need to be financed. They all have to work together, and they best do this in specific projects, use cases, corridors, which are close to TCO parity. So I think if you look at what is the most important parameter to get to TCO parity, is actually the usage pattern of the vehicle itself. So if you select basically those vehicles, that have on a consistent daily run rate of 300 kilometers and more, they are actually close to TCO parity today. Yeah, so the beauty with electric vehicles is the more they run, the more economical they get. Yeah, and so you have to, if you focus on these, this is great. The question is always, I mean, they're more expensive on the sticker price. So eventually they need to come down price wise, and this is where the economies of scale comes up. So we work with all the OEMs, yeah, and basically when we ask them, I mean, what should happen in order to come down with the price by 20%, 30%, because that would actually boost the TCO parity. Yeah. So if you had an order book, yeah. So, and this is where the chicken and egg actually comes in. So we have to break the chicken and egg in the market, yeah, by bringing in all the logistics parties together, and then that can work. On the life cycle assessment, so should then the battery electric vehicle be built from green steel? Yeah, it would be great if they were. Yeah, but I would say, and we in my former capacity, so we had the circular car initiative with basically all OEMs and basically recycled plastics and bioplastics and green steel and what have you. You open another can of challenges, because green steel in itself is like 30-40% more expensive than normal steel. Yeah, so unless you create a level playing field, a regulatory level playing field, CBAM and what have you, you open the next actually in a way challenge out there. So I would suggest to decouple that. Yeah, so if you throw, I mean, it's actually. This whole transition is complex to begin with. If you throw like 5 more problems into that, actually at some stage people say, okay, how can we ever get going on this? But eventually, and I think this is what the Commission has when the industrial decarbonization of the steel industry, the chemical industry, the cement industry. So this will happen, but I'm not sure we all want to move it into one box.
Stefan.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to, I mean, obviously we're awaiting the evaluation of the C2 standards and keenly await what the Commission will decide on terms of the scope of the reduction. I also just wanted to note that there's been a lot of studies on this where different energy carriers have been compared with each other in terms of well-to-wheel, life cycle assessments, etc. And most of them have shown that battery electric vehicles have a clear advantage to other fuel types. So that's something important to take into consideration. Also, on the UN level, we are working on LCA assessments to have this more standardized approach to compare different energy carriers with each other. And maybe just a side note, I mean, 50% of the electricity generated in Europe has already been renewable. So we see a very fast shift towards renewable electricity generation, even in Europe. So I think these factors just need to be taken into account when reevaluating the targets.
Talking of reevaluating the targets, thank you, Stefan. One of the questions that's come in from Alex is, and this is quite a direct question, does the Commission plan to review the AFIR regulation in 2026?
I would think that, to my knowledge, but I could be wrong on that, that was what is in the regulation itself. A review article is foreseen. I don't remember now if it's 2026, but we'll soon see the work program of the Commission. So, yeah.
There's another question that's from Abigail Osborne. That's often this happens at these events, points of clarity for the Commission. And she said that one of your colleagues in DG Move suggested that the Green Corporates Fleet and the CO2 standards revision are going to be presented as a package. Do you know if that's going to happen? Is that the thinking in the Commission at the moment?
I don't know yet. I know that we are working hard to finalize the CO2 standards before the end of the year. Our Commissioner made it clear also in the European Parliament, and I know that there is a commitment to do the corporate fleet as soon as possible. It was long due because it's in the Tsitsikostas, in the Commissioner Tsitsikostas mission letter, and we are working hard on that. It's 60% of the market is corporate, so I think it's a good opportunity, and also it's a good opportunity to move faster to the second-hand market. So again, to be seen how we are going to do it, but a proposal is coming soon.
Thank you. I'm going to take one final question to you, Maria. This is from Merida Di Girolamo. Sorry if I've butchered your name there. It's from Climate Group EV100. And because you picked up on this earlier, the question is, how do we address air pollution in cities if we don't focus on tailpipe emissions and only focus on the propulsion?
Yes. Maybe just to clarify, so when we talk, as you know, I say as OEMs about technology neutrality, it doesn't mean that we're asking for a U-turn or to abolish all targets. I mean, all OEMs have made huge investments into electric vehicles. If you go to any trade fair now, you see only electric vehicles being displayed. And in any case, in any projection, electrification is going to be mainstream technology. I think you're not going to find any company that will tell you otherwise. Also, we heard from Eduardo that there's a global demand for electric vehicles also outside of Europe, and of course European car makers want to tap into that demand. So we're not talking about seeing more combustion engine vehicles on the roads. There will be less of them. Electric vehicles will be the predominant technology, but we're talking about, let's say, allowing a smaller share of alternative technologies still to be available, because electric vehicles may not work for absolutely everyone, and maybe they will work for city dwellers, but I don't know, people living in mountainous regions somewhere in Central Eastern Europe. I mean, I came back from Slovenia recently. I've been to a similar event there, and actually when there was a survey in the audience about the next vehicle that they're going to buy, the most popular option was a plug-in hybrid. So battery electric was, I think, the third option. So I think if we just move a little bit outside of our bubble here in Brussels, and we consider, I know it's a difficult mental work, but the second option was still the diesel car. Yeah. So that's the reality on the ground. When you go to talk to people, they may not see immediately all of them electric vehicle as the best choice for them, and this is what we're trying to I think to say, that allowing a small share of alternative powertrains will be more beneficial than just focusing on one option that just may not work for everyone.
Yeah.
How small then?
Yeah.
No, I'm joking.
It's up to the Commission to decide.
Listen, we're totally out of time. Thank you so much. I want to say a big thank you to Stefan, to Sveinung, and to Christoph, who've joined us online. Yeah, thank you. And a massive thank you to Maria and Eduardo here. Thanks, everyone, for your questions. We're going to wrap the event up now. A big thank you to Euractiv and to ASEA for supporting the event, to the team that have done all the tech at the back. They've been wonderful. And please join for a quick drink and a bite to eat here and continue the discussion there. Thank you very much.